Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the podcast and YouTube show that goes over the trials and tribulations of the writing journey so that your journey may be a little smoother, a little more informed. Alex and I have forged our career stumbling into mistakes and learning the hard way. We wanted to make it easier for you. All right, I'm Chris Ryan, hybrid author, a bunch of published stuff. That's Alex Simmons, living legend, grew up with Noah, and today we're going to talk about Alex has written everything. Actually, today we're going to talk about, we're going to toot our own horn because on May 22nd, we have a joint venture coming out, one of Alex's projects, Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello, a great murder mystery play, but it's not new. As a matter of fact, we had to bring a guest star in today to help us recount where this play came from. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to introduce you to Greg Freelon. Hello, Greg. How are you, sir?
Hey, how are you, Chris? Hey, Alex.
Hey, buddy.
What's going on? Thank you for bringing me to the table. I'm excited to be here.
Greg, now, just so in case you don't know about Tell the Damn Story, I think this is episode number 358 or so. And over those episodes, one of the running through lines is that Alex grew up with Noah, and we've known each other for a long time. He has been a mentor, a partner, a boss, all that for me. But you and he have a history that go back even further. And as a matter of fact, you were instrumental in bringing Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello to living, breathing life on stage. And that's one of the things we want to talk about. However, Greg.
Yes, however. Yea, verily. Yes.
Your resume is so stunning that we really have to start there.
Okay.
Greg, can you be so kind as to give us a bit
the world
about your background and what a background it is?
I am.
Starting with building up Manhattan solo.
When I was living with the Algonquin, 1732. No, John Adams came to see us and the foundation for the Constitution of the United States of America, which is now being dismantled. All right, that's another story and another lifetime. We'll fast forward into the 1950s. Which is why I'm 74 years old. I was born in 1950. I'm a true child of the 60s. I came of age. I was 17, 18, 19 in 66, 67, 68, 69. I had an interest in high school in sports, but also I gravitated towards music and theater. Not necessarily musical theater, although that comes up in my history a little bit later. So I was straddling all kinds of hippie, and I was also a civil rights activist. My family had deep roots in civil rights activism and the anti-war movement then as now. I don't believe that there were really any true wars that needed to have happened. World War II might be the only exception in my book, but they could have handled Hitler very early on and did not. But anyway, all that said, is I grew up in that period of time, and I was very conscious of my civic responsibilities, as well as my quest, my journey, whichever that was going to be, in the arts. Was it going to be a writer? I don't know. Was it going to be a director, an actor, a producer? So even predating those late 60s years, I was making films with my friends, with my dad's 8mm camera. They were, Alex would, if we could ever find any of them, would love them. Very Spielbergy. We did war films with the fake bombs, stepping on a plank and the dirt flies up. I was doing all that when I was 14 and 15. And we had one set of floodlights, 4 lights on a bar lights, and the camera. And we did educational films, how to dissect a frog, how to make a stink bomb, and we did
how to make a stink bomb out of a frog.
Yeah.
Oh God!
And it's funny, the guys who were involved in that, our friends, and my brother Phil, who later became an architect, world-renowned architect. We were all just very creative. We made up the stuff that happens. All the kids in the neighborhood came to our house because they knew something interesting was going to be happening. Junior Olympics, we did all that in our backyard, including pole vaulting with a broomstick, all that kind of stuff. But
Not
anyway,
the safest backyard in the neighborhood.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. But we made those films, and they were really inventive. I had no idea that I would become a television director a mere 6 years later, or whatever it would be after I graduated from college, where I double majored in political science. My family, middle class, African American family, ascending and so forth, wanted me to be a lawyer. I did not want any of that. It didn't interest me. It didn't really believe in it. I gravitated towards the lawyer jokes and didn't want to be a part of it.
There was a little of it in your system.
Yes, they're most and theater. So that was my double major as an undergrad, and did very well in it. And I started as a lighting designer. And the reason I did that was the 2 years prior, as a 17 and 18-year-old, I traveled the country with the Electric Factory, which produced concerts then at the level that Ticketmaster and the other major ticket sales people bring the concerts in. Electric Factory did that in Philadelphia. So I learned lighting and sound and how to do it, how to build stages and all that.
Do you remember some groups that you worked for?
Everybody that was famous then I worked with,
Wow.
except the Stones and Beatles.
Okay.
Everybody else. Saw Jimi Hendrix multiple times. I never worked one of his shows. But the Rascals, Ray Charles, Mitch Ryder, Detroit Wheels, The Who was one of the groups. Procol Harum, I played pool with them at the Atlantic City Pop Festival. Dr. John, The Night Tripper, Joni Mitchell, and the list goes on and on. Electric Flag with Buddy Miles and Eric Blumenfeld.
So if I can ask, how did you get from all of that glory to the legend that is Alex Simmons?
All of that
seems to be a winding
path. And the die were cast. So that was my formative years. And I started directing TV, and directing TV led me to producing a national series for public broadcasting. That led me, when the funds dried up for that, to coming to New York to work in theater world. I was hired by Richard Allen Center for Cultural Art, a major African-American theater institution in New York City, to produce a bi-coastal Black Arts Festival. So from Los Angeles, California, all over the country. And then the funds ran out. So I was dithering around, as I always call myself.
As he's known to do. He dithers from time to time.
I am dithers.
Yeah.
And I was hired as the artistic director of the Children's Theater of Harlem. And so we were doing a big show there. And after that ended, I was called to the creative arts team.
By you, right?
And at New York University. Yeah. And they need a director. They're looking for you. So one of the cast members just said, you'd be great. Send your resume. So I did, and went there, and then became a vital aspect or part or creative force in the creative arts team, which is still going strong all these years later. And we were doing musical theater as education, conflict resolution through drama is what CAT brought to the United States of America as a particularly British form of education, alternative education. And we were frowned upon and all that. We actually created the groundswell for SEL, social emotional learning. So we were doing conflict resolution. First I did Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber. So we were doing historical context. Then we wanted to get into something a little deeper. So we did a show called Hannibal. And the guy we hired to be the lead villain, the antagonist, was very gifted, but he was very demanding. And so eventually he left the show. I took it over for a number of weeks while I was casting new people. And I went through all these people. I was singing all the songs. I was doing the singing and dancing at the same time as trying to keep the show's integrity intact as a director. And Alex came to an audition. I said, "You're it. Can you fit this satin jacket?" And I think you have a picture of that with Alex in that jacket, that jacket. So yeah, he was the king of the pack.
So he fit the role.
He fit the role and fit the jacket. So,
that was the key part. The costuming didn't have to be updated.
That's correct. Yeah, could be taller or bigger, or smaller than I am. The sad part is neither one of us can fit in that jacket at this point, I don't think.
Yeah, but we don't have to play that part anymore.
That's true. That is true. So that's how I met Alex. I cast him in the show as the co-lead against the actor who played Hannibal in these gang wars underneath the boardwalk in Coney Island. That's where the setting was. So we modernized it into a youth gang intervention piece.
Okay.
And it was very popular. We toured all over New York City. One thing about Creative Arts Team, and Alex can confirm this, I've been on every subway in the system and to some of the most high needs neighborhoods that ever existed in New York, because that's where we delivered our message. That's where we did our work in schools that were located in those places. All 5 boroughs, bar none. And so that's one thing I can claim about my time in New York City. So that's what I meant, Alex. Yeah, that was your first question. It took me 35 minutes to answer it.
That was beautiful.
There you
Beautiful. As you account in the materials that you supplied for the post-play interview in the book we're going to be publishing, you talk about having worked with Alex on a number of projects.
Yes.
Before Sherlock Holmes and the Hands of
Yes.
Othello. Do you want to comment on any of those projects before we move to Mr. Holmes?
Okay, sure. I think Alex and I hit off, as you could tell, the moment we got on this feed together,
Sure.
with just our jocular kind of nature, our wit or lack thereof, as some might some might categorize this. But it's natural. It's always been there. We could not see each other for 5 years and immediately just start riffing with one another. It's a natural thing. It's hard to rehearse that. It's hard to develop it if it's not already there. That foundation was there the moment I met Alex. That said, Alex then expresses his interest as a writer, and we worked on something that I produced and directed and raised the money with Linda Zimmerman on. We changed the dynamic in terms of youth training for entry into the workforce. Most of the major corporations were worried that the youth of that time, those coming through or out of high school, were not prepared at all for what the workforce had for them. So I was working with, you named the top Fortune 500, Peggy Delaney was the president of one of the New York foundations there. Peggy Delaney is a Rockefeller, so David Rockefeller's daughter. So we raised money that way. And then because it was going to be such a big project, I hired a multitude of writers. We had a writing team of 5 or 6 people, one of which Alex I offered the gig to first. Greg Holtz was there, Gwendolyn Hardwick, all people who've done amazing work in that time and since then, to create characters and create those character arcs through a 4 half-hour dramatic series of children, young people finding, getting, and retaining, or in some cases losing their employment, their jobs. And why? They don't get along with the boss. They can't stay on time. They can't, a lot of the things that young people don't know how to do. So that went on to become one of the most popular educational videos at the time that it was released. And then our team went all over the city again, using the video to have workshops and conversations about what was going wrong with the children or what was going right. How could you change it? How would you? And then the children get up and act that out. So Alex was a strong part of that. Shortly after that, he came to me with, look, I want to do murder mystery theater in restaurants. Instead of saying, are you idiot? Are you nuts? Yes, let's do it.
Let's do that.
And we did. I think that those experiences helped me as a director, as someone. I can tell you some of the places I've staged other programs or full theatrical pieces that would daunt many people. But we did that. We researched our restaurants. Alex hooked up most of them, got
Chris
the
was
restaurant
a part
owners,
of that briefly, too.
restaurateurs.
Oh, yeah. I did a memorable performance.
Oh, did you go? Did you see one?
No, I was in one.
Oh,
were you?
And we had done all the prep work for it, and we had, you know, how the cast would mingle into whatever, the restaurant or the party or
regular
whatever.
Patrons,
So we get the okie doke to begin. So the first movements are starting, and we'll call her a patron of the arts.
Okay.
She's well over 110, it seemed. And she stood up and said, okay, everybody, we just want you to know we have a surprise. We have a murder mystery for you. We spend all the time just mingling and dropping hints and establishing our characters. And one sentence, she just shattered everything. And then said, proceed.
So then there were those. I think I directed 3 of them, if not 4, until Sherlock came along. We did maybe 2 before Sherlock and 2 after. I can't remember, but something like that. It must have been during Sherlock because we were down there near the West Bath Theater when Alex and I were walking to the subway and said, well, let's ask this guy if he wants to do it, or can we put our flyers up in the window? That kind of thing, just hustling.
Yep.
So those were concurrent, but they were steadily establishing our working relationship as a writing, directing, and producing team. And those times were invaluable to me. I called upon those experiences once. I'm working with a performance artist now on a show called Zora, about Zora Neale Hurston, a one-woman show. She plays 18 characters in this dramatic piece from 8 years old till when Zora passed away at 60 years old or however old she was. And one time, Antonia Badon, who plays Zora so brilliantly, she called me up and said, Greg, I got a place we can do this show. I said, where is it? She said, well, it's at a barbecue restaurant. I said, okay, I'll come take a look. Just like with Alex. Went to look at it. They gave us the basement, the downstairs restaurant area that had parquet benches. They had the benches. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? But we did it. We did 5 shows there, sold out every time. And it was tight. I had to use scoop lights with 100-watt light bulbs in them and clip them around. And I had a little thing they had at the time where you could actually fade those in and out. So like a handmade light mixer.
It's amazing the things that we'll do when we're trying to find a way to get the art out.
I'm a Peter Brook aficionado, and his philosophy: give me an empty space, and I can make theater happen there. So that I learned early on. Yeah.
Chris and I often talk about one of our favorite questions as a creative is what if, and I think the other favorite question as a creative is, how can I do this?
Yeah.
It's not if I can do this, it's how can I do this?
That's correct.
Oh, yeah.
That's correct. I'm still that way today.
Yep.
So that's how we met, and that's how we develop our relationship leading up to and intertwined throughout the Sherlock time.
So let's talk about Sherlock Holmes. To zero surprise on my part, this is one of the few pieces where Sherlock interacts with people of color.
I don't know any. Alex would know better than I.
It's not one of the things that Sherlock did a lot, but here it comes. And now we have an opportunity with you and Alex to talk about how that came about, right? Because Alex had some passionate studies about Ira Aldridge and, of course, a passion for Sherlock Holmes, born of viewing Basil Rathbone movies as a child and all that. But again, Tell a Damn Story is about the process of creating, right? So if you would both indulge me for a second, one of the great parts of creativity, especially if you're working with someone else, are those early conversations, which are basically what if conversations. So do you remember anything of the conversations of mixing Sherlock Holmes and Ira Aldridge? How did this idea start going back and forth between the two of you, or did Alex just present it all in his usual way? His signature move is to present sterling writing that glows off the page, and there's a host of angels singing Hosanna as you turn the page.
Okay. Sometimes the archangels join in there.
Yes, that's true. It's tough to read while they're singing.
And that glow behind my head. Okay, so let me just do this quickly to get to the part where Greg and I started working together. Around that time, and we're talking the mid-'80s, around the mid-'80s or so, there was the Negro Ensemble, which was a stellar theater company that produced a number of wonderful plays with stories based on the Black or African American experience. And they did a play, which later went on to become a film, called A Soldier's Play, which became the film A Soldier's Story. And I went to see that because I was also acting at that time, and I was involved with a number of people in the theater. So I got to see the production and met one of the actors, and we hit it off with some conversations and things that we were having. It was fun. And he brought up Ira Aldridge. And there's this one comprehensive biography about Ira Aldridge, which he had a copy of it at that time. And it was the kind of thing where the only other place you could find it, aside from ordering it off from some publishing company, was in the museum. Oh God, don't do this to me.
Schomburg.
Schomburg, thank you. The Schomburg Library. That was the only other place you could go and look at this. So he gave me his copy to read. And it's a thick volume. And I'm reading about Ira Aldridge, this real black actor from the 1800s, lived in New York City, was part of the African Theater Company in New York City in the 1800s, and was very ambitious, a young man, all this, and supposedly extremely good at what he did. And the British actor Edmund Kean, who was a star at that time, his troupe came through New York. Somehow he and Ira met. I was taken by all of that and left New York with the company to go back to England and began performing there with them, and eventually built up his own reputation and career playing Shakespearean parts like Othello and Shylock and so forth. And because of him being black and the timing, he was unique. I'm not saying he wasn't facing some sort of racism or people going, what the hell kind of thing. But because of who he was and what he was doing at that time in this very unique scenario, one, he was performing theater from an emotional standpoint as opposed to the proper sort of stylized art form that many of the theater goers were used to at that time. But then also, there was the Irish Revolution at that time, there was the Russian Revolution, there was the Irish Rebellion. There were all of these people fighting for recognition or fighting against some sort of oppressive scenario. And here was this black man who represented the oppressed from the United States on this stage playing these powerful characters. So again, he became a celebrity, both, shall we say, working class people and certain people of prominence were attracted to him and wanted to know him or favored his productions and that sort of thing. So I'm reading this and I'm going crazy over this information because I had never heard of him, never. And it's such a phenomenal story. And again, real life story. So then I'm thinking, how can I bring this to light at that time? And of course, literally, the what if. I'm thinking, wait a minute, 1800s. Okay, by the 1880s, when Sherlock Holmes was active, fictionally active, Ira had already died, but his family lived on. And again, some of the things that happened to his family were very conspiratorial, very suspect, very strange, very offensive, even mysterious deaths and things like that. So I went, okay, Holmes is going to get involved in solving some major crime or atrocity that involves the Ira Aldridge family. And that was where the wheel started turning. And eventually I started writing it. And I don't remember when I finally showed it to Greg, but up until that point, I got a lot of enthusiastic. Wow, this is really cool, fun. Yeah, I can't wait to see you do it. I can't wait to see you do it. I can't wait to see how somebody's going to do this. And then I show it to Greg, and he goes, "Okay, so let's see. How can we do this?"
There you go.
That's true. That's true. I want to just chime in again. The synergistic, or I don't know what you want to call it, the ethereal connection between Alex and I mentioned my undergrad years with theater, BA. My undergrad thesis was on the politics in Black theater. I did, as Alex did, research on Ira Aldridge. I did research on Black theater in America from the very beginning. There was a man named William Brown who actually had the African company, the theater company Alex just alluded to. He was an entrepreneur, unlike any other African Americans in New York City at the time. He owned a restaurant, he owned a hotel, and he owned a theater. And he used freed slaves, many of whom were educated and could read, and runaway or escaped slaves who could not, to do Shakespearean plays, particularly tragedies. And this was in 1821, this incident. And Ira Aldridge was 10 years old at that time. And he used to sneak in against his parents' wishes to watch these productions of Shakespeare. And then he did. The reason why he went with that company is the New York authorities were bringing in Edmund Kean to do a play. I forget which one it was, Richard III, maybe? I'm not sure. But I think it was Richard III. And William Brown said, "I'm going to do it too." And he also had the temerity to put white people behind in the back. So white people bought tickets to see the shows. They sat in the back. That's how this guy Brown
That's how he
operated.
rolled.
Yeah. And they said, you can't do it. We're shutting your theater down. They did. And he said, okay, all right. Is there any law against a black man renting out the ballroom in the hotel next to the theater where Kane is going to do his performance? He said, no. All right. So that's what we're going to do. He rented the ballroom and he did Richard III on opening night of Keen's, and it caused a race riot. And New York State put on his book then, African Americans can't play Shakespeare, can't do Shakespeare at all. That stood until the WPA, when Davis and Orson Welles started working together.
Yep.
So that's my story, my connection to all that. Years later, I played Papa Shakespeare, the only fictional character in an accounting of that whole time. And I toured in London with that show. That was my one major acting thing. I never got paid for doing that.
I'll go back and I'll collect for you.
Yeah, I never got any money. I wish I knew somebody like that at the time. But all those connections, I read that play. I'm like, yeah, we're doing this. What do we need to do?
Yeah.
So what were your first impressions? What did you think about the play?
I just giving you that background. I hope people intuit that I was blown away by it. This has to be told. This story has to be told. And like Alex, I grew up watching Basil Rathbone and every other Sherlock Holmes. I read all those books. I read H.G. Wells. I was fascinated with that period of time, that style of presentation, and Sherlock Holmes, amazing, brilliant. So Conan Doyle was a part of my formative years intellectually, at any rate, and creatively. So that bond had existed before we even knew it existed. Now, we talked about comic books and we talked about Sherlock Holmes, and we reenacted scenes from movies, Alex and I, multiple times, just fooling around. Just on the subway going home, we would break into these things and just riff, improv it on the train, that kind of stuff. And so it was a natural fit. I was looking for something to do to elevate myself away from the NYU piece. I had started my company, Windy Crest Media, which I still have. So I was doing films outside of the NYU realm, educational films and community-based narratives for promotional purposes or documentaries. And this would be a great way to get out of the educational theater world and get our names known in the larger theater world.
Yeah.
And so we went and looking for theaters, and we found Arnold Engelman at the Westbeth, and we liked it. I'd still talk to Arnold today. He was a good supporter. I can't remember what kind of break he gave us, but he did.
Oh yeah,
and
I can still see that space. I can
yeah.
see that space in my head. Yeah.
And we also had a bond in when we cast the film I was referring to, the educational film about workforce development. Alex sat with me in all the casting sessions, not only for the part he wrote, his character, but I had him with me for every other one until we had a cast that was really pretty good. It was something special, that piece. So we were used to working together in that, the give and take, the yes and no, the what do you think? Here's what I think. What can we do? That was all of that. That's the process when you're in a collaborative effort like this and at this level, at this juncture, off-Broadway, legitimate off-Broadway production. And so we did it, and we did it to great success, I believe. We got what I consider a good review from Mel Gussow. I wrote a letter.
The New York Times review?
Yeah, New York Times. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was good. I still don't know what one of those words he used.
Got it right here. I'll reread it and try.
Yeah, what does he say about your writing? Because I still don't know what that means. And I looked it up.
It's funny. I think at the same time, and I know we're hopping around here, but at the same time that our production went up at the Westbeth, there was a Broadway production.
That's correct.
With not Jeremy Britt, with Frank Langella.
That's correct.
And I forget the actor who played Watson, but it was a Broadway production of a Sherlock Holmes play. And basically, as I remember Mel's review, he found some rough spots in our production, but we were better in one realm than the Broadway show. So that was a good thing. But it was funny because some people who had gone, audience-wise, some people who had gone to see the Broadway show came to see ours, and they liked ours more. And
ours was very good.
Yeah, I think that's partially, it's definitely the directing, but just to help add context, Greg had mentioned the casting. We spent a lot of time and a lot of thought in the casting process, and we got a great cast.
Oh
And
man.
then we were fortunate enough, and I may be jumping ahead, but we were fortunate enough because of the appeal of the play, and it sounds strange for me to say this because I feel like I'm patting myself on the back, but because of the appeal of the play or the uniqueness of this particular story, or however one looked at it, we wound up with a Broadway lighting designer and a Broadway set designer, and also a costumer, person who'd worked with Broadway and many other productions, high level productions, coming on board with my pittance, my tuppence,
Yes,
my meager dollars to create the parts that we needed from their particular skill set.
that's correct.
So something about the story and maybe the atmosphere that Greg and I generated, the creative atmosphere, that
Yep.
people wanted to be a part of that and did it for far less. Many of them did it for far less than they would have received in other works that they were being offered.
In
Uh,
the interest of balance, the Amsterdam News did a long piece at that time in which Javiola Sinclair said that Alex Simmons had written a delicious murder mystery, and the direction by Greg Freelon is delightful, as is the set by. So you got both complimentary D words in
did you
this
use
long
"De
piece.
Lovely"? That
Be lovely,
we could
yes.
start
And
dancing.
she had a great middle, I think 6 or 8 paragraphs about the history.
History, yes, that's
Yeah,
correct.
that really set up the play really well, which we had talked about with Ira and all that.
Yes,
But the play itself, one of the things that is, especially these days, when so many books are being banned and so much history is being erased, here's a play where one of the more beloved characters in fiction is walking into a new mystery populated by people of color, and it's another mystery to him. It's people in need of his particular form of help, what he can do well, and he sees little difference in this mystery from any other mysteries. And I think it was a great subtle statement to make, to bring it out again, that this is actually the way we should be behaving, as opposed to the dominant horrors that are going on these days, as far as erasures and denials and hiding pale shame, as we might put it.
the historic record.
Yeah,
yes,
yes,
or eradicating it.
yes.
Yeah,
But when you first saw it, it was sometime in the 80s.
yes.
What was your approach to this play? Was there anything you wanted to emphasize in your production, in your direction, or was it just
Authenticity. We used equity actors, so they were getting paid, and some of them started out not rambunctious or cantankerous. Why are we squished in this dressing room? That kind of thing. But again, Alex referred to the spirit that we created, the energy, the vibe that we had in order to attract all these other folks to it. And eventually, they all thanked us at the end for one of the most powerful experiences in their young lives. And we're still in contact with many of the original cast members.
Where would you
But
say the
anyway,
power of that production came from?
who Alex is and who I am. I think that there's that. Again, writing was stellar. If the script wasn't on. When I read it the first time, I maybe had 5 or 6 notes for him, for Alex, about the longer soliloquies. And he either resisted for cause or he made the changes. And I just went with it because the script was so powerful that I'd figure out ways to make it work. And some of that, when you're doing staging long monologues, is what's going on in the background, what's the small business, what the actors are doing, how they're moving, where they're moving, and why. So I was very precise in all that. As a matter of fact, before we had our first meeting, after we had it cast, I had a production book for them to study, about mores of the time, about how people looked and dressed. And it did come up because one of our actors was, when am I going to be able to kiss Amanda? I was like, never, because you're not going to kiss her.
Yeah.
And had you read the book I prepared for you, you would understand why.
Why?
Yeah. In Victorian times, men just didn't do that.
And that's a funny part of it too, because there'd been, you talk about what was part of the power. I do feel that the environment and the energy that Greg and I generated on so many of the things that we've worked on together, and I've seen things that he's done where I wasn't a part of it. It's always about serving the story, as Chris and I talk about it. It's all about let's work together to make the best possible presentation, production, whatever it is, performance that we can. So we benefit from this. So the audience benefits from this.
Correct.
It's never about us against you. It's never about us against them. It's about how do we work together? How do we make this the best possible experience for all? He mentioned that there was some ruffled feathers at certain points and during the production, during the rehearsals and things like that. And that's true because you had a lot of energy, you had a lot of different temperaments, not negative, just different temperaments. You had people trying to understand the material because the language is close, very close to the sort of authentic manner in which people spoke at that time. So it's not just common or everyday or average American dialect. And that was a bit of a trick for some people to get basically, but they got it. But there was some of that. And there was also, again, the physical comforts or discomforts of the space we were working in. How do we work with that? Even our set designers and people, they had challenges that had to be met.
Oh gosh,
So sometimes in the pressure, and I do remember there was one moment, it's the only moment that I can ever recall where Greg and I butted heads for some sort of an instance where, uh-oh. And that had to do not with anything he was doing or anything I was doing directly, but with the construction crew that was working on our set. They were behind.
yes.
They were behind and it was causing a problem. And they had this laissez-faire, who gives up attitude. And it was really a problem because we were coming down to the wire. And I do remember we were in the Black Box Theater, which is a very small space. It was raked. So the audience went up, right? The stage is on the floor level and the audience went up. So and I remember standing there and Greg and I were both heated. But identifying the problem and being able to communicate about it. And again, remembering this is about serving the story. We got through that in a matter of minutes, and I got what he was saying. I went, oh, okay, I get it. It's not us, it's them. And he had a way of trying to deal with them. I said, okay, roll with it. I'm going to focus on such and such. And that's what happened. It was like Cisco and Pancho, the Lone Ranger and Tonto. We took on separate assignments in order to bring a positive conclusion to the challenge.
Yeah. There are challenges, and I remember that. I don't remember us having a discussion about it, but I do remember that. And I remember immediately after, then I just lit into them. So we lit a fire under their respect.
Because they had taken his soft-spoken nature as, oh, he's a wuss. We can walk all over. Wrong.
The actors found out they couldn't do that as well. So it's just my way. I am soft-spoken, quiet kind of power. But yeah, those things held us back. But one thing that we did have, I'm going to just jump back a couple of minutes ago, when Alex was talking about the comparisons between the Broadway show and ours. And I think ours was absolutely better than theirs. Remember, this was 1987, in October of 1987, that we staged this. And Alex, through his contacts or one of the people who he found to help fund this, they brought Andre Balazs in, or Katie Ford, one of the two. Katie Ford, the modeling agency lady, and Andre Balazs owned Studio 54 at a number of hotels in New York City at the time. He was at the top. They came not once, but twice. And the second time, they brought Katie Ford's mother, Mary Ford, who founded the Ford agency. And that was a Sunday night. And after they stayed around, and after the show, we want to get together with you guys and talk about moving this up. The next day was Black Monday in 1987. Stock market crashed. I never heard from Andre Balazs again, or Katie Ford, or her mother.
Damn.
So timing is everything.
Yeah. I do want to go back to something Greg said, because I think it really addresses great lessons for emerging artists, creatives. You talked about putting a production book together so that people would know the period and all that. But then you said, and they would understand the why of it.
That's correct.
And that's really important for storytelling, no matter what genre you're working in. So I was hoping you might be able to expand on the importance of knowing the why of the story you're telling, or the nuances of character interaction, the why of it.
I think there's some schools of theater creativity that's about, all right, here's a script, actors, go do your thing, and we'll work on it as we go along. I don't work that way. And I'm not saying that style of acting or presentation or creating theater or theater art is wrong or doesn't work. My approach is rather than during rehearsal times, staging times, blocking times, run throughs, or rather than having to do deep dives and discovery as to the whys. Why am I doing that? Why am I moving here? Why am I saying it? Why do you want me to say it this way? By creating that dynamic, by doing my research about what it is as a staging visionary for this marriage of the script and bringing it to life, is that I want everybody to know exactly where I'm coming from as the driver of this stagecoach. And it doesn't mean people can't raise their hands and ask for a stop. I got to get off for a minute and get back on. Let me think about this. And what it does is open that for me to that communal discovery of actors and director coming to an agreement on what and why they're doing things. So having that base is, I tried to set them up to do their own homework, how they're going to approach their individual characters. I didn't do individual character breakdowns. I just did a period and the vision for what we're going to do moving forward, which was pretty detailed. An actor's job is to dig into the script and figure it out. Yeah. In marking my scripts and my blocking script, and in the early days without any actors, just going through and figuring out where the beats are in any given line of dialogue, or particularly in the monologues, where the beats are, what are the changes, where are the shifts, where do you downshift, where do you rev it up, where do you go way low. I do that heavy lift before I even go to the first read aloud, table read. And I don't share any of that with them at that point. I want to hear what they're bringing to the table. So the dynamic from my point of view in directing these things is to ensure that everybody starts that first read on the same page of the same book. That really cuts down on the craziness in the middle of the show. I don't understand why. Okay, all right. Come over here and let's talk about that. You got a lot of that covered earlier. Go ahead, Alex.
I'll give you a quick comparison versus what Greg has just described and what we were blessed to have with the actors that we worked with, as opposed to, there was supposed to be a reading of this play. It was I think it was a couple of years after the production. And it was at a college that's well known as a college for actors. If you come from this college, people go, oh, wow, you came from. And the person who arranged the reading asked me to send up the script like 3 weeks before the reading. And so I did. And the day of the reading was a Saturday. And I went up early in the morning to attend the rehearsal. And the cast came in and we sat down, and the director proceeded to try and pull this together and start talking. And we found out that most of them hadn't even looked at the script. So that's one. It's a 2-act play. By the way, we've never told you people what the play is about, but bottom line, it's a 2-act play. So it's a regular full-length play. They began to do the read-through, and it was painful to listen to.
Sure.
Oh, man.
Because they were falling all over the words. They didn't understand why it had to be phrased this way, the blah, 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 blah. And when we finally took a break, I started getting from several of the actors, why didn't you write this in regular English and blah, 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 blah. And I said, I'm sorry, what school am I at? Why didn't you look at the script 2 weeks ago? Why didn't you, if you had looked at it, present these questions to your director before today?
Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry, aren't you supposed to be actors who are studying to play different types of characters? Not every character you're going to play is going to be written in quote unquote regular English.
Do you remember any of their reactions to that?
Oh, yeah. There was some hostility, some attitude, and then there was a couple of them who went. So 1 or 2 got it. The others 5 kept coming up with excuses until the director put her foot down. And basically, they fumbled through it again for a little while. And I said, okay, here's the deal. There's no way you're going to make it through 2 acts of this play at this pace. So you're just going to have to do maybe a few scenes from Act 1 for the reading tonight. And I left. And I wasn't yelling or screaming at anybody. I was just calling it the way I saw it. I left it to the director to make her decisions. And sure enough, that was what they did that evening. They did a reasonable kind of reading of the play. And I would really hope that those actors learned something because they were about to graduate from there and go out into the business.
Yeah.
And the
It
business
don't sound like they
slap
were
them
ready.
down real hard.
Yeah.
Would they come out with that attitude like, why isn't it written so that I'm okay with it? No, that's not your job.
It's another opportunity for us to again encourage everybody who is watching that no matter what part of the creativity you're doing, you have to serve the story.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember quitting a theater group because they had come up with commitment to an idea. I don't know what school of thought this was, but they said you are not to read the stage directions. And I said, why? It'll force you to limit your performance. I was like, not if you're an actor. What are you talking about? If you're going to respect the work, you respect every word of the work. You read it, you learn what this person is saying, and then all right, how do I serve this story? You don't pick and choose. It just drove me crazy. But it's that same kind of thing, is not doing your due diligence, not preparing. Whether you're a writer, a director, an actor, you have to contribute, and you have to, going back to Greg's observation of the why, that's inherent on you to do before the table read, before the first rehearsal. That's how you make your contribution. And as we're also writers and stuff and directors, you do the same thing. You do your due diligence. You live in what's presented on the page.
Yeah.
You know?
Let me ask a question to Alex.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is a question I ever asked you, and you can refresh my memory if in fact
Yes,
I
I
did.
do love you.
I'm sure, I don't remember the script exactly, but I'm sure that your script was rife with stage directions, which I by and large did not ignore. But I'm sure that in visualizing and creating the blocking schemes that I had for the show, which were pretty intricate, that I may have blown by some of your visionary thoughts in stage directions. And I don't know if you can recall or not, or we can have this discussion right now.
Put them up.
Yeah. What did you think about the way it was staged? Because some of it was certainly different from what you had written and the vision that you saw when you were writing those words. I write plays too, and I see what I want the actors to do and what I want the backdrops to be, and et cetera.
I think probably the most concise way that I can answer that question is you may remember that I even choreographed the fight scenes
Yes.
in my stage direction, right?
Yes.
And I did that because everything else in the play, I did have my vision of how things worked. The benefit of, and this is again patting myself on the back, the benefit of working with you, but also having been an actor at that time and other things, is I understood collaboration. I wasn't sure what was going to happen once you took the helm, but I knew that whatever you did, you were going to be doing it for the sake of bettering the production. So I was open to seeing what you were going to do. And I don't remember ever having any kind of discomfort, dissatisfaction, or negative feeling whatsoever about the blocking and things that you did or the staging that you did. I do remember, and again, not a negative, but I do remember our fight coordinator,
Yes, I remember him, young guy.
wonderful young man. People would look at him and go, "He's a fight coordinator?" Yeah, but yeah, he is. And the first thing that he said to the cast when he was about to work with some of them is, "We are not fighting. This is a dance.
I remember
And
that.
we're going to dance together, and it's going to look violent, but it will never be violent."
Yeah.
And he changed some of the blocking that I had
Right.
worked out. It wasn't like, "Oh, this is all crap, toss it out." He went, "Okay, this move wouldn't work well on a set because this for a stage, it's going to be downstage, it's going to be upstage." So he brought his expertise and experience and training to that. And once again, I went, "Oh, okay, can't do that." But Holmes can do, yeah, okay, fine. But he's had some.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that exactly.
Right. So
But-
that's really the bottom line of it is Yeah, unless someone chooses to change something that tears at the very fiber of what you're trying to say or
Right.
completely destroys the logic or authenticity of a character, you gotta look at that and go, okay, let me see how this goes. And if it's a problem for you, then be willing to talk to the
That's
other
correct.
person or persons to see what can be worked out.
What I would say, Alex, to clarify my earlier point, is that it sounded like the dance coordinator or dance choreographer, excuse me, the fight choreographer read the stuff
Yes, we had
and
deep
then made the
discussions about it.
judgments.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
This would work. This would work. And that's the approach that I was explaining to that troupe that they had to take, that you don't just ignore it and go in blind.
yeah.
You trust yourself as an actor. All right, these are the choices that are being prescribed in the play. If there is a reason not to be at that part of the stage or not. I did a play once where I was supposed to pick up a girl and swing her around. Wasn't going to happen. So I offered
Yeah.
a different take on it, and it worked comedically. That same play they wanted me to sing. That would have created a stampede. But singing off
Toward you
key,
or off?
yeah, running for the
Oh,
hills.
wait. Okay.
But singing off key was in that character's makeup. So when I was able to say, listen, just let me try this and see if it works for you. And when the director laughed out loud, I knew we had gotten there. But it's respecting what's on the page and then contributing creatively from there, not running from it, but
Yeah.
serving the story in the best way. You, Greg, I'm sure you had to look at that space. And if I just finished going through the play for publication purposes, there are a lot of different sets. So
Yep.
it created a lot of things, I would say numerous decisions that you had to make.
Yeah. We had a
You can
two-tier.
never be tied directly to every word of a work.
We had two
But
tier sets, so it was up and down. There was a crossway. There was magic involved in the appearance and disappearance of
sure.
Ira Aldridge's spirit. There were a lot of challenges in doing that, but Alex and I worked with the designers and stepped through every from the paper drawings through the maquette, the model that was presented to us. We could actually look and manipulate.
That's
This is
great.
going to work. That's not going to work, and that helped create that dynamic. But by that time, like by the time I had already had a clear vision of the staging, what it's going to look like. Of course, with room for growing and fixing things that weren't going to work within that space. So yeah, it was very tight, which is why we went up to the second level, which caused some problems. I had to build scaffolding that would hold our people without injuring them. So safety was a big thing. And I think Alex alluded to that with the fight
Oh, yeah.
coordinator. That's the first thing he talked about was safety through the lens of dancing instead of actually fighting on stage. So again, it was just an organic and holistic piece that we didn't have a whole lot of complaining. I think just one about the dressing room and we fixed it. They brought that up. We had a stage manager who was very taciturn. He looked like an undertaker, tall, very pale, skinny guy who never smiled, never laughed, even at my jokes or Alex's. But he came to love us at the production. So he let a lot of things slide. Somebody else who, the way we think about what he looked like, would have been calling in equity every day. And so I'll never forget. His name was David. I can't remember his last name. But again, we had that whole crew, that the union side of it, just fall in with us and live with some of the hardships that they had to endure in the dressing rooms with all the changes that they had.
We had two things that I'd like to point out. One, going back to when we were talking about the race factor, because again, Holmes is surrounded in this particular story by several Black characters. And in terms of authentic Conan Doyle material, there's one story that involves a character of color. I won't go into it now, but there's definitely one. But in this case, they're predominant characters, lead characters in this storyline. And there's no Watson's off married, and so he's not even in the story. So we get pure Holmes. And then what we learn about Holmes, or what the audience learns about Holmes, comes from his interactions with the other characters. And there's a scene with Lestrade, who I always loved the character, but I always saw Lestrade as a very sort of working class, blue collar kind of come up from not the streets, but from the working class or maybe poorer side of the city into a top job as a police inspector because that gives him some sort of command. And he's racist in the scene. The way he approaches the crime that takes place at the home of Ira Aldridge's daughter is like those people and them this and that. And Holmes is at first so involved in the case that he's not dealing with any of that stuff. But then at one point, Ross says something, and Holmes goes, "There are aspects of your personality that I've never noted before."
Yes.
And to Holmes, it's curious because he's not. I'm like, why are you? Oh, okay. I don't see any use for that here. And
elegant slapback.
So he's aware of this, and because I like the characters and everything, I was true to what I felt would be Lestrade's nature coming up the way he did. But at the same time, I have an affection for the character. So there's an arc that Lestrade goes on through this story. And by the end of the story, there's a moment which I wanted to see, and which we have in it, where you can tell that maybe he's still got that in his head, but in this particular situation, he's treating these people like people. And so something's shifted for him because of this experience.
Yeah.
The other thing is you talked about the characterizations. We had Tyne Winters is the name of the actor who played Holmes. And I remember the audition, he came in.
Tyne Daly would have been a whole different show.
Yeah, really, it would have been, yeah. Holmes, the lady. But Tyne Winters came in. I remember he did the audition, and we had the call back, and he came in, he did even better at that. And then when I can't remember exactly how it worked, but before he left at the callback, he knew he got the role, and he went, "Oh, great!" This 6 foot something tall became a little kid for a moment and a half. But he was wonderful as the character.
For me, if I remember correctly, the minute he opened his mouth, I knew he was going to be.
Oh yeah, but we did have a callback.
You and I talked about that.
Yeah. And the other thing that I also will mention, another moment, again, that deals with people's perception, because we had actors who knew that they were going to be doing this kind of a play in this kind of situation, and they brought the fire, all of them. But during the auditions, there was a young woman who came in to audition for the role of the Countess. And the way the room was set up was Greg, the stunt coordinator who wanted to be there at some of the auditions and so forth, and myself and I believe the stage manager was there too. I remember there was a fourth person. And so Greg was doing most of the talking to the actors when they came in. And he would, depending on how the opening remark worked, sometimes they'd get into doing their audition piece before any further introductions. So finally, this young woman comes in, she does her introduction of herself, blah, 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 blah. And Greg says, "Oh, hi, I'm Greg Freelon. And this is Alex Simmons, the playwright." And she goes, "What? You wrote this?" Oh, it's, and we just sat back and went, "Okay, burn the bridge. Go ahead." And she trying to backpedal out of her reaction. And then finally she did her audition, still shaking, and she left the room. I know she left the room going, "Oh, I screwed that one up." But those are those moments that some people just came in and said, "Okay, let's do this." And other people came in with their perceptions or misconceptions. And I think, again, at the end of it, we wound up with a really great crew who, even with the physical aspects of it, really put their heart and soul into it. And I really can't complain about any of it.
I think that during the casting process, we gained a lot of respect for the equity people. And even stage manager David had to give me a little nudge. "Greg, these people, some of them clearly are not for this. You've got to let them go. I let everybody have a chance to do a reading. I never just stopped anybody because they were obviously not suited or didn't know what they were doing." Mm-hmm. We had many of those that were eyebrow raising. "Oh my God, really?
Yeah,
you're an equity actor."
Yeah. I'm Danny DeVito reading for Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, you were there.
In the new publication that's coming out, we're aiming for May 22nd, Sherlock's birthday. Greg, you were kind enough to grant us an interview, and there's a line you included in there about the actress who played Amanda and her accent. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Mizan is from the Caribbean. Which part? I can't remember. Trinidad, I do believe. And oddly enough, I just saw her and another actor that we've worked with over the years in a movie that just got released. But they had to have made it dozens of years ago because of their youthful appearance. They're our age. So, at any rate, Mizan had the affectation, not only as an actress, but as a human being. She was it. She was the queen. She was at the top of the heap, and you could not tell me any differently. She had, I wouldn't call it an affectation, but she used the Caribbean part of her heritage to infuse her parts with a regal authority, apart from being in the play. So she played Amanda. And so there's a point in the play where somebody, it's probably Holmes, tell her, got to do this. It's so important. We can't lose fact of this. And she turns to him and says, what would you have me to do? I just love the way she delivered that line. There are many great lines in the play, but that one, because of Mizan and who she is and the beautifulness of her approach to her life and her acting and her spirit, has stuck with me all these years.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's cool. That takes us to that other level once the writing is done and once the production has started. And it's the nuances of the contributions of each of the members of the cast, both on stage and behind stage, and that bring what's on the page to life. We may have some people in our audience that are either writing screenplays or stage plays, television. Can you give us some insight into what to keep in mind while you're writing it out so that it sounds and it lives and it has an energy and a heartbeat once it's on its feet? What advice would you give emerging writers who are hoping to find someone like you to bring their work to life?
Okay, I'm going to include Alex in this too, because in the original script, I don't know, there were 10 or 11 characters written. And so one of the first things I said to Alex, we got to knock this down. And so he and I sat down and went to the script, and we figured out who could play multiple parts. So one of our actors, very gifted, Robert Blumenfeld, played Lestrade. He played an assassin and one more character, I'm not sure.
He played the sailor.
And the sailor. Right. So Alex had to figure out, okay, how can I move these so that he has a chance, he can be in multiple scenes, but always has time to change his costume. So the sailor is one and done. He gets murdered. Not to give anything away. First scene, I think. So that's done. But mixing Lestrade in with, I think, a Russian diplomat. Am I correct?
Yep. Not a diplomat, but a Russian character.
Yeah. We had to figure out how to do that. And then one of the other characters had to play multiple parts. So the assassin, redhead assassin, played another kind of diplomat or something else. I don't know. We had to condense the original cast that Alex saw in his mind and wrote into something that I could do eight actors on the stage without compromising one word or one bit of action that Alex had plotted and drafted and written into his script. That would be one, is making sure that if you're doing multiple character plays, scenes, plays, full-length plays, scenes would be a different story, that you're thinking about the potential for production. Some producers, theater producers, people who own or operate houses that could stage, will look at that and say, we can't do 11 or 12 character plays. We just don't have the budget to support that. And so we tackled that very early on before we even really got to budgeting what it was going to take to do this. And so that was very helpful that Alex was gracious enough to make those slight changes. I don't know, major changes if some of them were, can't remember. But it also brought the play to life. And actors like Robert were just so good and so very distinct in each one of those parts. People didn't know that it wasn't three people, one playing each of those parts. That's how good. He's still one of our friends. We're always in contact. Yeah. I would say that as you're writing, start to think about that. It's hard to, as an artist, as a creative, to worry about money. But if you want your piece to see the light of day, it has to be producible. And to produce anything, a film, a stage play, a television show, takes a certain amount of money. Now, there are ways to do things for us who do direct and think things through and make them happen like Alex said at the very beginning, or you did, how are we going to do this? That fits within a certain budget. As a director, producer, as a writer, producer, you have to have those things in mind as you bring your vision to life, or it may never see a stage, be mounted in the way that it deserves. So that would be my most critical response to that question. The rest is up to your intuition and your energy as a creative person, a writer, playwright, is being true to your vision, making sure your characters have distinct voices in the story that you're trying to tell, or I should say in the damn story that you're trying to tell. And then you have the flow line. I still work with young people today telling stories. We just had a film screening of a film my students last summer made. And I'd stress on that. It's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So let's start there. What are we going to do and how are we going to do it? And then let them run with the ball. And as the elder statesman at this point is help mold and direct the very distinct visions that 5 different people wanted to see in this film. And it came out marvelously. The screening was last Friday before last. And it was a fundraiser. It was SRO. It was really pretty cool. Good. So Good. That I would say to young people going to write, make sure, unless you're doing something that's really out there, that you want to change the dynamic, change the game, if you have those kind of vibes, chops, then go for it. But really, you got to have beginning, middle, and end to a story, and characters have to be true to that story and themselves. To me, that's the essence of writing. And I don't know, Alex, what would you say about that?
Pretty much I agree with everything that you said. I would only add to that when I talk to my students, I teach screenwriting at the Film Academy. One of the things that I tell my students is you may have this grand vision of your film, of the story that you're trying to tell, but the question that you need to ask yourself is actually, first off, what is it I'm actually trying to say? What's really the theme? What's really the message? What are these characters really going through? Because sometimes you're going to envision multiple shots and multiple locations and a cast of 112 and all this, when it's really a story about 2 people or 5 people, and it's only one location or maybe a couple of exteriors, and that gives you more time to focus on those characters and their story and their arc and the quality of the language between them, all of that, as opposed to trying to shoot Titanic. So I often say, please ask yourself from the heart, as many times as necessary, what am I actually trying to say here? What's the message I'm really trying to convey here? And then what do I need to get that across? And that will help you more authentically envision the scope of the film or the play that you're going to do. But when Greg was talking about the characters, yeah, once again, Robert, Nitsky, Piper, the sailor, and Lestrade, 3 different people on that stage, one after the other, 3 different ones. The other actor who, and I'm sorry, I will put your name in print in this thing. The other actor, whose name I can't recall, he played the assassin and several other characters, but it was the assassin portraying these other characters in disguise. But again, different persona, different approach to the character and the character's interaction with people on the stage. So you want, if you're directing, go for the talent. Don't think about, oh, I got to have a big name or he or she's got to be damn good looking and everything. Go for the talent.
Yes,
Ultimately, good looks does not guarantee a great performance. What you want is somebody who's going to do justice by the work and is going to bring that character alive in a way that's going to be a win for everybody else involved. So that's another factor. The size of your story and what are you trying to say? And then if you're directing or producing, go for the quality of the talent as opposed to the looks or celebrity status or any of that other stuff.
I agree. I can't say.
Here. There. Yes.
Archangels are singing again.
I do have one last question or request for comments. I'm functioning as a micro publisher on this project, and I know why I think a standalone publication of Sherlock Holmes and the Hands of Othello deserves to exist and deserves to go out there. Is there anything either of you can say to people who didn't know this was coming out about why it should exist in 2025 and why it's worth their time? Because I believe it does the Holmesian tradition great justice, but also expands into the world as it looks. We're a mosaic. We're not, and the idea is to thrill and embrace that mosaic, which is not what's happening these days. They want it to be a piece of white china.
Bowl of rice.
Yeah, bowl of rice. No spice at all. But I think this work and other works, especially Alex's Blackjack, they're going to become more important the longer this cultural insanity is happening. What might you comment on that, if anything?
Alex, you want to take first?
You go first, because I have a
All
thought.
right, I'm going to frame it. I'm going to frame it this way. I just jotted a couple of notes down as you were framing this question, Chris.
Stumbling around, really, but go ahead.
Okay, I think I can bring it into focus from my point of view. We live in an age of streaming content that is vastly formulaic and horrible in its presentation. The acting is terrible, the scripts are terrible, but yet they're getting funded because people are watching this stuff and paying to do so. In the context of a project like Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello, as a stage production again, and I'm hoping, and I've told Alex this multiple times, to have the opportunity and the honor to stage it again with him before all is said and done. But even as a film project, what it brings to people is, we talked a lot about the racial history of some theater legends, American theater legends, African American theater legends that people don't know about. I think of an age group that doesn't know anything about Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And while reading levels and scores are going, they have nobody to read to them if they're young or read it themselves. They're so involved in their electronic devices and their handheld computers and whatever it is that they're doing in that. Most of the people I see on subways are playing games. They're not researching, they're not studying, they're not trying to better themselves intellectually. They're deadening the pain of a certain kind of existence that most people are living nowadays. The drudgery of going to work that they don't like. So Sherlock Holmes offers not only an insight into a very important part of American history, it taps into the Victorian era and the incredible legend of Sherlock Holmes that was brought to us by Arthur Conan Doyle in a way that's vibrant, that's exciting, that will keep you glued to the edge of your seat if you're in a theater, or have your nose to the screen if this ever makes it to the big screen or small screen, in ways that many of these things that are now streaming and readily available cannot do. It just can't. There's how many people can you shoot in one movie? It's insanity. And how many heroes can escape being shot at by a 50 caliber machine gun and not have a nickel? Oh, it's crap. Let me put it that way. So this is an effort to add to the canon of really powerful dramatic pieces that have been created by some of the most brilliant authors and playwrights in our and other generations. Alex is among those to me. And so I'll say that. And the angels and archangels are singing over my shoulder, even as I say.
Oh, thank you, Greg. Wow. Okay, I'm going to turn a lovely shade of auburn in a moment. I'll do it two ways. Chris said something that sort of intimated that this had been published before, and it had. Among the audience of the original production was a gentleman named William Branch, who was putting together an anthology of Black plays at the time he came to see this. And he contacted me and through email and stuff, because we had it back then. Just not the way it is now. But anyway, he contacted me. And we talked, and he said, if I can get this whole thing together, I would like to include your play. And I'm thinking, okay, it's going to put together a pamphlet or some little digest-sized book, and that would be cool. It'd be really great. I love it. Considering this is my first major adult, mature piece, this be pretty cool. I'd done a lot of children's stuff before that. And eventually he did pull it off. He got it published by Mentor Books, which was a division of Penguin at the time. And
Black Thunder, right?
Yeah, he sent me the cover, and I looked at the cover and I froze because the title was Black Thunder, an anthology of African American drama. And among the collection of plays, which I believe was something like 9, there was work by George C. Wolfe, by Leslie Lee, by Amiri Baraka by August Wilson and Ed Bullen. And
See what I said?
and then there was my name in the same lineup. And I went, holy, I was scared. I was so frightened because these were giants. These were, as I said, I remember the moment I saw this, I remember saying, these are real playwrights. And I felt like I had just dabbled. Yeah, I'd put years into it, but in my head at that moment, I was nothing like these people. And it scared me for the longest time. You're going to be found out you're a fraud. You're going to be this, you're going to be that. I loved the work. I loved the production. I loved the people I worked with on it, all of that good stuff. But there was a part of me that lived in a corner for the longest time being afraid. And I admit that openly now because that's something that many creatives do have to deal with, that imposter syndrome thing that gets in our way of pursuing our dreams and our goals, even when we're willing to do the work. We're not wishing on a
Sure.
star and wanting somebody to give it to us. We're willing to do the work, but some part of our brain is saying, you're not worth it. You're not going to make it. You're not going to do this. And even after something like this, going, yeah, you con them, you fool them. This is a mistake.
And the sooner we make peace that creatives have that, all of us,
Yeah.
the better off we
There's
are.
no question.
Absolutely.
No question
So Chris wanting to do this new production, this new publishing piece of it, this solo piece. Also, I got a little twinge when he said that. I'm thinking, why does he want to do? Oh, you know what? Shut up. Okay. So there was that. I can't think of a better person to do it because I
That's
know
very
that
nice.
he, again, serves the story. He's gonna call me out if he finds something that's off. He's gonna come at me with it, and we'll work it out. Oh, the other part of that, aside from my own journey, is absolutely in the time that I entered this world, and Greg actually came in a little bit before me, but not by much. Our people were riding in the backs of buses. There were places in New York City, let alone the South, where we couldn't eat, we couldn't get jobs. During my teen years, there were people, black and white, who went from the North to the South to help register blacks to vote, and some of them didn't make it back. There were a number of accomplishments that were revealed that people of color had participated in or initiated, inventions that we had done we didn't even know about, that have come out in the past 50 years. And now, so actively and enthusiastically, folks are trying to erase all of it. And that ain't right. And that's not going to happen. I think that we need to more than ever, and speaking as a black man, yes, I'm talking about black people and their accomplishments, or people of color and their accomplishments, but I'm also a globalist. The world is not just Caucasian. The world is a mixture of so many different types of people, different cultures, religions, life choices, all of that. It is what makes the world. Our
Yeah.
power, our culture, our magic, our sensibilities, our survival is dependent on not having this monstrous Mr. Hyde ego that says that only I matter, only people like me matter. It's bull. The bottom line is we all matter, and we need
Mhm.
to remember that, and we need to remember the accomplishments of people who have come before us, had less to work with, and still managed to matter and make a difference. So to me, Ira is definitely one of those people. The fact that he is buried in Europe in a prominent place, that there's a plaque on the back of one of the chairs at Stratford-on-Avon honoring many of the actors who've done Shakespearean plays and so forth. The fact that his daughter, Lorana, who lived in London in the 1940s, trained Paul Robeson, makes the connection of artist to artist. And that matters, and that should be told. So I am hoping that this release is going to help serve that purpose. I'm hoping that people will discover the play and enjoy the play for what it is. I'm hoping that once again, Sherlockians, as they did when this play was produced, and we had invites to go to their various functions, different chapters of Sherlockian fans loved the play. They didn't love the play because Sherlock is in it, but oh, there are these black people. It was, oh, a Sherlock Holmes play. And, oh,
Right.
interesting characters, a different story. Does Sherlock do Sherlock's thing? Yes, okay, I'm there. That's what we want to do. We want to entertain, we want to educate, we want to inform, we want to enlighten. It's what we've always done, it's what we're going to continue to do until our watch is over, and then we'll pass the baton to somebody else.
I couldn't agree with that statement, series of statements, Alex. Very well said.
Thank you. Thank you.
For my part,
welcome.
this is in defense of the mosaic.
Yeah.
I don't want my world bleached.
I hear you.
Hopefully all this hot air and evil burns itself out and people regain their senses in a way that can restore some bit of decorum and hope for the future. I don't have it on right now, but I have a wristband that says hope. It was given to me by my 90-year-old former landlady in New York.
There you go.
So,
I got a
so
couple of things that I have to say before we call it an evening or an afternoon or morning, whichever it is. Chris, I'm enjoying my Sherlock Holmes cup very much.
Greg, I had that
beautiful.
Cup. I had that
Quickly.
that mug for 15 years before I had a chance to give it to him face to face.
It's in a perfect hand. What a great gift.
So the other thing is some of the things that were mentioned during the interview, for those of you who are going to be watching it on YouTube, I will have some images popped in there. So you'll get to see a little of the cast from Hannibal. You'll get to see the original cast from the Sherlock Holmes production we're talking about. And a couple of other little images in there. That'll be there for the production itself, for the
Outstanding. Very good.
upload. It'll be there.
Cool.
Very nice.
Yeah. And Greg, thank you. It's been too long. I know.
Way too long.
Recently, before that, we hadn't seen each other for years.
We had coffee together 6 months ago.
Yeah. So we got to keep this up.
Yeah. So that was good to see you in New York. Yeah, I'm not in the city anymore, so that makes it a little bit tougher, and then your schedule is just as busy as mine is with the stuff I'm doing here. But
long may it wane.
The case is afoot.
Yeah, that's right. It is. Absolutely.
We will. I'm trying this little aside, working with the American Conservatory Theater of San Francisco and possibly bringing Zora out there. And if that happens, and if that happens to be successful, I'm going to try and talk them into considering a production of Sherlock out there as a commission. That's one thing. I had the Met Opera House here in Philly interested in doing that. That kind of fell apart. And my opera's Perfect Harmony was going to be placed in there. But the owner of the theater is facing financial crisis and lawsuits. So I just backed away. Yeah. We'll keep it up. I have file all the stuff you sent me for a brief intro on Sherlock Holmes, because I am intent on bringing that back to life on the stage, at least. Yeah. But you guys have done such a great job of bringing it back. I can't wait to buy the book. So let's get it out there. All right.
Okay, buddy. May 22nd, Sherlock Holmes and the Hands of Othello.
I will have a copy on my desk.
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, if you liked what you saw, please hit the subscribe so you can get more of this. And we hope that we're continue to help you tell the damn story.
Absolutely. Oh, and if you did, as Chris said, you can subscribe and hit the button and all that good stuff. You can also help support us. Buy us a coffee. There's a link in both the YouTube version and the Spotify version. Buy us a coffee, a little cup of coffee there. Just drop
tea for me, please.
I will drink it. I will drink it in my Sherlock Holmes coffee. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much for your time and your insight today.
Yeah,
we look forward to seeing you when it comes out, and we'll see what you think.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to dig into it, and it'd be joyful just to read the whole thing again. I haven't been able to do that in years. All righty. Thank you, my friends.
Take care, everybody.
Peace, everybody.